Today is Wednesday, August 12th, 2020. We're almost halfway through the month of August. Welcome to another show. I'm joined today by my co-hosts, Carlos Ponce, just outside of Mexico City, and Kim Lantis in Hermosillo, Mexico. Hi, Kim. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you.
Today, we're joined by Kimberly Wiefling. Did I say that right, or is it Wiefling?
Wiefling.
Excellent. Who is going to be talking to us about an interesting topic. But before we get into the topic, let's get to know you a little bit. Please tell us what you're all about.
I was raised as a physicist, okay? I loved science when I was a kid. I studied physics in undergraduate and graduate school, and I thought, hey, I'll be a scientist. But come to find out, I started working in the corporate world, 10 years at Hewlett-Packard, and then 3 failed startup companies in Silicon Valley. Exciting, ending with the dot-com bust. Started my consulting business in February 1st, 2001. And ever since then, been focusing all on the human skills, what my friends in the engineering world call the touchy-feely crap.
The touchy-feely crap.
Well, a lot of people refer to that. I've been referred to often using touchy-feely crap as a way to try to encourage people, but that's what works. Anyway, before we go into that, tell us a little bit about your company, your Wiefling Consulting, but you're also the co-founder of Silicon Valley Alliance. Can you tell Can you tell us a little bit about those two efforts?
Yeah, so about more than 12 years ago, I started going to Japan every month, okay, for 2, 3, 4 weeks. And I started bringing people with me to go and help globalize Japanese companies. And somewhere around 4 years ago, my agent in Tokyo had a different pivot in their business. And so I just said, well, let's just keep doing this together. So the people who were working together here and in Japan formed Silicon Valley Alliances. And we are still serving Japanese businesses, some of which are huge global companies.
Well, I'm curious to learn about the topic today. Thanks for introducing yourself, and also learn a little bit more what your experience has been like working with Japanese companies. They're typically not touchy-feely types of corporate culture, aren't they? So let's dig in to see what that experience was like. Kim, what's the topic today? Let's introduce the show, please.
Yeah, this Kim.
Yes, Kim Lantis.
Perfect. Thank you, Tulio. And it's nice to have you here, Kimberly. So today's topic is overcoming the global pandemic of dysfunctional organizations and disengaged employees. All right. So something that's been around long before COVID and probably will be around long after as well. But we're here to try to prevent that and stop that, right? So hopefully what we'll learn about today is how to gain an unfair competitive advantage through healthy organizational cultures where common sense is common practice. So Kimberly, please tell us about that. And I guess, let's touch on this idea of a lot of times common sense isn't so common, is it? So when it comes to, let's say, dysfunctions in companies, what do you say those top dysfunctions are?
You know, I like to go back to Patrick Lencioni's model. He wrote that book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
And I like that one. I love that one. Yeah, it's a really good read. Easy read. It's those of you who don't know it, it's a great read. Super practical, really great information. And it's cool because it reads like a novel, like a story.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But the thing about that, I always ask people, who is surprised that there were only 5 dysfunctions? But there's so many ways for things to be dysfunctional. But if you look at research on what really causes failure in teams, like based on MIT researchers, for example, they find number 1 is they fail to build trusting relationships. And that was at the foundation of Patrick Lencioni's model as well. You don't build trust.
Yeah, and talking about Japan and Japanese culture, I'm actually in the process of reading another great book right now called The Culture Map. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, by Erin Meyer. It's great. And she maps out business cultures across the world, and she puts them on different scales. and evaluates different elements of culture, such as our communication styles, how we tend to give negative feedback, our perception of leadership. Should it be egalitarian? Should it be hierarchical? Who does the decision making? Is it top down or is it consensus, right? It's really great. And one of the chapters that I just finished reading was about building trust and how it goes from, there's two main types, affective and then cognitive, I think it is, right? And what's interesting is that the Japanese culture tends to be very, very effective, right? It's all about relationship building, getting to know you first before I can trust you. And then here we are in the United States, which tends to be the exact opposite, which is more cognitive, right? So it's, let's get down to business. Let's make sure that you've proven yourself, that you've got a track record, that you're financially secure and whatever, and then I can do business with you. And so we've got to figure out these different ways of building trust, which is really fantastic.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know how to destroy trust, right? That comes very easy to people. You just ask people, hey, make a list of all the ways that we could destroy trust or make it worse. And they have no problem generating 20 or 30 ideas in about 2 minutes.
So how do we build trust? That's the harder question, right? Go ahead,
well, so here's the dilemma. I want to just build on that, Kim. There's a lot of leaders who they feel they're doing the right thing, for example, in trying to assist the organization with solving problems or coming up with a solution, putting in place processes, all well-intentioned things, right? But often don't engage the organization in that conversation. So it's kind of top down. And ultimately, then they're surprised there's a lack of excitement for what is supposed to make, quote unquote, people's lives easier. So, and then the leaders got to think like, wow, they don't appreciate that I did, quote unquote, all this work to try to make their lives easier. But the one thing that is often missed, that is a fail, is they didn't build the relationships to have trust that what was actually being put forward was, quote unquote, valuable to all the people involved. So in your experience, how often does this come up, and how do you make the change in an organization to realize that that simply doesn't work? You first have to build trust and relationships, and then you get to do the other stuff. Tell us a little bit about some of your experiences with this, please.
Yeah, I recently was doing some consulting with an organization that had a really dysfunctional work environment. And so they were going to sign the contract and hire me to do this work. And I said, hey, wait a second, stop. Don't sign that contract. And it was tens of thousands of dollars. Okay, I could have really used that contract. I said, don't sign that contract until you answer this question. You want me to go fix your people, but when I find out that you, the executives, are actually contributing to the problems that you're complaining about, how shall I tell you? And the guy goes, oh, yeah, Kimberly, just tell us. Well, 3 months later, they weren't so happy to hear that indeed their people held them responsible for all of the dysfunction and felt no responsibility to fix it for exactly those kinds of reasons. And it's more frequent than I care to admit. It's an epidemic. It's a pandemic.
Yes. Okay. So what is the root cause in your experience of that? I mean, you've got the traditional megalomaniac who, God forbid you disagree with him or her, it's like death through insecurity, right? So they're incredibly insecure. That's the dirty secret of megalomaniacs. So how do you work through that? How do you get them past that? How do you get them to see themselves for the underlying cause of the need to be in control that way?
I'll tell you a true story. I worked on a project not so long ago where there literally is a psychopath for the CEO. And you cannot change a psychopath. The psychopath brain is different. But what they did was they created a secret pact among the executive leadership team, and we helped create a subculture that could protect the organization from him. So there are some things that you just aren't going to fix. But then there are other well-meaning people who never distinguish the difference between being a manager and being a leader. And I think if you think about how many people really like to be managed, I haven't found a single person who raises their hand for that one. Like, no, nobody wants to be managed, manage budget, manage schedule, manage equipment, but don't manage people. Manage cows, for crying out loud. Lead people. And that means using yourself like a magnet to attract them to something that is appealing, and they would willingly follow you. And it's been known for about 30 years how to be that kind of leader based on research on millions of people all over the world.
Kim, I got a question real quick. We're talking, you mentioned that, you're mentioning disengaged employee or employee disengagement.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing is that this could be because they're either reacting to, as you mentioned, to a psychopath, right? In this case. So
that's very rare.
Yeah. That's a possibility. But so how do you, my question is, if the employee is disengaged because of a reaction to an unhealthy situation at the top, how can it be best? What is the best path to follow to fix the situation?
Well, first of all, it's not the top. Unfortunately, that's the biggest impact on employee engagement. This book came out from Gallup last year. Sort of gives away the surprise, doesn't it? The biggest cause of lack of engagement for employees is the direct manager. And again, that's been known for 30 years. What kind of manager really gets people engaged, right? Not everybody, but it's not rocket science, right? It's much harder. Like from a leadership standpoint, from the executives on down, all you need to do is be a good example, right? Like, for example, I do this in my workshops. Make the OK symbol with your hand. Go ahead, make this with me. And OK, place it on your chin. Yeah, but your chin's here. Yeah, your chin.
We all did the same thing.
And this is the problem.
Because they're following what you were doing.
Exactly. And that is the biggest cause of this kind of dysfunctionality, is that the people with power in positions that should be leading are behaving in ways that they are not supposed to. And you shouldn't do it either, right? So if you look at, why did these people get put into positions of power? Do we just have a habit of promoting these megalomaniacs? And the fact is, no, there's research from Stanford University, Bob Sutton, that shows when people get power, they get power poisoning. It changes them in 5 ways. Be happy to tell you more about that.
All right, let's go right into it. I want to hear those 5 ways, and I concur. I would say there have been a lot of CEOs we've spoken to through some of the work that some of us are working on with the Radical Purpose group, and a lot of people say the same thing. I didn't like who I became. You kind of become a product of the machine. So what are the 5 things? Please share. All right,
so Bob Sutton, power poisoning. When people get power, they receive more flattering feedback. So people are suddenly telling them all kinds of wonderful things. And it's like being monkeys in a tree, right? If you're the top monkey looking down, all you see is a bunch of smiling faces. But if you're the bottom monkey looking up, you can imagine what you see.
Okay. That was very illustrative.
It's a 3-letter word that we're not allowed to say on here.
So that's the first thing, is they receive more flattering feedback. So shame on us for not having the courage to speak truth to power. And the second thing that happens is they have lower impulse control because there's just no consequences for their actions. And then they think of their own needs more than others. The people who are in positions of power, who are responsible for others, think of their own needs more than others. And they have lower empathy. And the 5th one is they think the rules don't apply to them. Now, you don't have to search very far to find examples of this in the news every day, right?
Wow. Interesting. So how do you, that obviously does create a fairly dysfunctional organization that results of that.
Because by design, so Bob Sutton asked the question, do we just promote these jerks, or does power change people? And without a doubt, power changes people. And you have to do things to prevent that, because the hierarchy concentrates power in certain people's positions, that is the root cause of this dysfunctionality. So you cannot have this typical power structure and have a healthy work environment.
You know, I have to agree from personal experience. I've been in business world 31 years, and I've been in traditional corporate settings. Even haven't been a partner with some of the big consulting firms. Mm-hmm. And I would concur that the more power you gain, those habits come out. And I think it's a ill effect of the environment. And most of it is people just stroking your ego all the time and, you know, inflating it, and you start to believe that stuff.
Right.
So conversely, what I've seen in our organization is the complete opposite of that. You know, we don't have that power structure. Therefore, it's more team oriented. It's more shared authority. And as a result, you don't create this model where someone gets out of control or out of hand, right? Because so how do companies, for example, that have the situation where it's become dysfunctional, make the shift, right? You know, because it's not an easy thing to go tell the CEO, by the way, to change it, you have to give up the power you currently have, and you have to make yourself equal like everybody else. You can still hold the title for functional purposes, but your word is not much more important than anybody else's. And it's like, heck no, I've spent 30 years getting to this seat. So how do you transform out of that dysfunctionality?
That's why when I worked with Nearsoft long ago in Mexico, I was down in Hermosillo briefly, and I met Roberto Martinez, and that man said to me, Kimberly, if my people want somebody else as CEO, I'm okay with that. I'm like, holy cow, that's amazing. But no, I usually do not try to change the executive level. Let me tell you what really happens. Japanese companies hire me, and the Japanese executive who brings me in gets up in front of the workshop on the first day of this, you know, long 6-month program. And he says, I am 62 years old. I am going to retire and play golf. You have to change. Pay attention. So even when they bring me in to change the company, they don't bring me in to change them. Now, sometimes they have the wisdom to stay out of my way and to let this thing happen. But sometimes they are actually obstructionists to the change, in which case I just fire myself. Because my goal, when I work with my clients, my goal is either be effective, transforming them for the better, or get fired. And I honestly don't care which one.
Wow.
It's true. It's true.
No, it's good. I think the goal is to actually work yourself out of a job in some ways, right?
That's when it goes well, Kim.
Exactly.
But also sometimes, you know, I have companies that have prepaid hours still on the books years later, because after they realize, oh my gosh, we executives have to change, they are no longer interested in speaking with me. So I worked mostly with Japanese companies because Japanese companies had a choice. We can change or we can die, because Japan's economy has been flat for the last 10, 20 years, and their population is shrinking. So if you're a Japanese company in Japan and you want to grow your market share and grow your revenues, you cannot do it inside of Japan. You have to go global, and you have to hire crazy non-Japanese people like me and learn how to work with them. So they're very motivated.
Crazy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You know, so in working with executives like that, is there some underlying things that have come out? I did a survey across 1,400 people as part of something I was working on to do a TED Talk. It didn't happen this year because of COVID, but hopefully it'll happen after it's over. But in that research, I discovered something really, really telling. And that is that most of these guys, they have this duplicitous life. At home, they're one way with their kids and their family, the soft, gentle, compassionate, loving individual. And in the office, they put on this mask of the, you know, dysfunctional CEO, right? But it's exhausting. It's exhausting, and it's very stressful. And a lot of these guys die young because of that, with heart attacks and other conditions. Have you found any underlying thing? And what I found was the underlying thing is actually a great level of insecurities and low level self-worth. Those who need to be more in control have lower levels of self-worth than those who don't need to be in control. And it's not an easy thing to get to because it's buried in the subconscious. Anything along those lines have come up with you for you? And how do you explain to someone like you're actually a control freak because you don't really love yourself enough? How do you get through that? That's like really hard, right? What are some of the things you do in your workshops to bring awareness to this dilemma?
Okay, so I'm a big fan of cognitive behavioral therapy. What you're talking about is how people think and feel. Honestly, I don't care how they think and feel. What I care is what they say and what they do. So what I teach them is, here's what you need to say and how you need to say it, and here's what you need to do and how you need to do it so you can be effective. I don't care what you think and feel inside. I can't change that, but I know that if you stand up and you smile and you go like this and you say, I feel sad, you don't feel sad. The way you change your body and your behaviors will impact how you think and feel. So I'm not going to spend my time trying to convince people or to coach them or do the psychological counseling. If I want someone to lose weight, I don't make them read a book about going to the gym. I take them to the gym and get them to exercise, right? I mean, you can talk to people who are overweight all day long about eat less, exercise more, or you can take them out on a walk. I take them on a walk. Let's go and let's do things. Let's exercise the right muscles so that those things get bigger and your thinking and feeling starts to align with how you're behaving. It's all behavioral.
Right. So I know that you make some of these workshops a lot of fun, Kimberly. What are some of the prompts you use? Can you show us some of these prompts?
I like to use the chicken because I have this big learning. It's like this. I talk to all these people and I say, okay, why did the chicken fall? You know what they always say? Gravity. I'm like, oh, really? Oh, yeah, gravity. I guess that contributed. But is there anything else?
You let go.
I let go. Thank you, Kim. So here's the problem. If I talk to the individual contributors, they tell me the managers are screwed up. All right. I talk to the managers. They'll tell me, oh, the executives, they're the ones that are the problem. And the executives whisper, yeah, it's our CEO. And the CEO blames the chairman of the board. And the chairman blames the economy or the competitors. Nobody feels responsible. This helpless victim mentality represented by this chicken is the most important lesson to be learned. It's like, yeah, I am somehow contributing to the problems that I am complaining about. No matter what our position or title is, if I can get the executives to understand that they are contributing to the problems that they're complaining about, woo, the lights go on. And then I use the koosh ball. Catch this, Kim. Come on, catch it. Yes. And if you really, I'm in violent agreement with somebody, I might wear these. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, because now I've got all these workshops going on virtually, and I have non-native English speakers mostly among my clients. And even with interpreter, some of them only understand 70% of what I'm saying. So I have to communicate in other ways, And my favorite prop is the mind-expanding ball that can be worn on your head in a pinch. Woohoo! Now, I don't use these just to be funny. I use them because I want people to be awake and present. Because if they're not paying attention and they're not engaged, they're not going to change how they behave or how they speak. And they're not going to change the organization. So I need to get them engaged.
Right. And it's an easy way to also remember, right?
Yeah.
To make this connection. And remember the chicken? Like,
Right.
I think it's much more easy to remember than, hey, don't
There's
let
some
go.
mnemonics involved.
Kim, I did a workshop last week that was a whole day on Zoom. And one of the people had been in my workshop, I guess, a few years ago. And she brings out this dirty little rubber chicken and goes, Kimberly, remember the chicken you gave me? And I'm like, would you wash it, please?
Well, at least at home and she's using that chicken. So let's talk about a lot of what I'm hearing. I mean, one is that, yes, there has to be this awakening at the leadership level of an organization. But what if I'm not the top leader in my organization, but I am a leader in my organization? I have influence for those in my immediate team, potentially have influence for those a bit above me if we're talking about a more traditional structured company. What can I do? Like, okay, so we've talked about, this inner working, let's down with the psychopath CEO, right? Which is very extraordinary, hopefully. But what are some practical things that I could immediately do to gain trust, to make people feel a bit more comfortable with conflict, to have them feel more committed, to hold one another accountable, and ultimately to get those results that we're all hoping for? What are these practical steps? And I guess with the ultimate goal of the other influencers seeing perhaps of this impact that I'm having and have that sort of ripple out. So what can we do?
So I call it a consciousness conspiracy. So you find a couple of people like you and you say, leadership is not position, not title on your business card. Leadership is behaviors. It's the way we treat each other. And actually, here's the 30 behaviors of the best leaders on planet Earth, according to a book called The Leadership Challenge. Like what you said, model the way, be a good example, inspire shared vision for where we're going together, challenge people to think out of the box and not just say yes, but all the time. And help other people be successful, right? The rising tide lifts all boats. And then encourage. So those are the 5 practices of the Leadership Challenge. And when you look at this, the 30 individual behaviors, you won't see any that require position or title. None. 0. They're all things like speaks with conviction about the meaning of our work. Feel free to start doing that right away. Or, if you want to build trust with people, hey, one way is get to know them. I meet people and I say, oh, tell me your life story starting at birth. Now, usually they go on for 3, 4, 5, 10 minutes, maybe longer if I keep showing interest. Only once in the thousands of times I've done that has somebody said, no, I'm not doing that. Everybody wants to be listened to. Building trusting relationships starts with knowing each other.
That's great. And I guess my final question is, what do we do when we get tired? How can we remind ourselves to step back and actually perhaps see the impact of our efforts, or B, prevent being tired, or C, know when to call it quits?
Oh my gosh, this is such a great topic for now, because I have been exhausting myself supporting family, friends, colleagues, clients in this pandemic, this real pandemic of the virus. And what works for me is I got to have some daily self-care, and I need a little core group of people that are not psychic vampires, right? Psychic vampires that suck your will to live. You got to have someone that you can call up and say, I just need to do a little of the BMW. MW means moaning and whining, and you can guess what the B stands for. So you got to have somebody who will just listen to you. And I actually also have a coach that I call once every month and say, oh man, I need to talk to somebody.
So the lesson here is don't go it alone.
No, that's right. It's a team sport. And that's why I have Silicon Valley alliances, because, oh yeah, I can work by myself. And sometimes my clients hire me. I could go alone and I could keep all the money for myself. But I always bring at least one co-facilitator, and sometimes more. And we do revenue sharing, open and transparent. Everybody sees all the money on a spreadsheet and decides what percentage everybody gets. And, because I think that it's a team sport, and we can demonstrate the leadership qualities of a team, a real team, better if I'm working with my colleagues. Yeah, it's turning a group of people into a real team. It's not rocket science. You have to have some shared goals. You have to have priorities that are aligned, and you have to care about each other. And any sports team is a great example, right? You have 9 different kinds of players on a baseball team. You don't have 9 catchers. Everybody's got to be different and differently gifted, we call it. Anyhow, yeah.
Wow. This is such an interesting conversation. We can probably go for another half hour for sure, but we're up on time.
Already?
Yes, we are. I'm just sitting here listening. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're up on time. We could go on forever with this. One final question. Is there generational differences in terms of the quality of leadership is there hope for the newer generation to be less controlling and more relationship based, or are we repeating the same patterns over and over? Please, just give it to us straight. What's going on?
There are some brain patterns, of course, that are continuing. But in Japan, for example, I would say that a young person in Japan has more in common with a young person in the US than they do with the older generation. And the number one cause of low employee engagement in Japan, which is like almost the worst in the world, it's like 136 out of 140 countries. It's only 6% of people are engaged. The number one reason is the command and control style of the older generation boss, with the young people who want nothing to do with that. So I don't know if we see a permanent change yet, but I think there's plenty of evidence of how top-down hierarchies don't work, and companies like Zappos are experimenting with different ways of organizing that do not concentrate power and authority in that way. That leads to all the dysfunction.
Here's a news flash. All generations don't like that power play. It doesn't have to be the newer generation. So thanks for joining us, Kimberly. It's been very enlightening. We'll make sure that on the landing page we put links to find you for those organizations that do want to make an impact and do want to increase engagement, and perhaps are more open to consciously put in place some of these initiatives and workshops. Thanks for joining us today. Awesome. Thanks, guys. And Carlos, we got another show tomorrow. What's coming up?
Yes, indeed, sir. Tomorrow we'll be speaking with Jeff Haney, the CEO of Pinpoint. Pinpoint is an engineering operations platform that uses AI to streamline, analyze, and forecast work so that engineers can do more of what they love. And the topic is going to be AI and software, or streamlining developer workflows. That's tomorrow right here on DojoLIVE at 1 p.m. Pacific, Tulio.
Thanks for joining us, everyone, and stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.
And stay sane.
Oh, please.